Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Everybody, how you doing? The sun is shining today, and we are in here. So let's just, let's condense this, do it 10 minutes, Kevin, be done, bam, out in the sun.
Amen. Why don't we just do it out in
We could. The topic is going to be on storms today, so it could raise a storm if we go out. Don't know. But welcome. Glad that you're here. If you're visiting with us, we're especially glad that you would choose to be with us today. We have practitioners in our service today who are holding us in prayer and high thoughts, so we always appreciate that. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Our reading for this morning is by Ernest Holmes. It's from the writings of Ernest Holmes, and they're two short sections. Even if our hearts condemn us, we know that the Spirit, which gave the heart, is greater than the gift. And an evolved soul judges no one, condemns no one, but realizes that all are on the road of experience, seeking the same goal, and that each must ultimately find their home in heaven.
Great song, great words. Change is going to come. Change is always coming, right? Change is happening all the time. We're talking about storms today, and storms come. Storms come and go. Storms come and go. It happens all the time. Rumi speaks for us when he writes this: drum sounds rise on the air, and with them my heart. A voice inside the beat says, I know you're tired, but come. I know you're tired, but rise. I know you're tired, but come, because this is the way. Often the way involves going through a storm. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about storms, going through the storm, and maybe how to calm the storm a bit. And so naturally, the thing that I first thought about was I thought about the Bible, where it tells this story about Peter and the disciples. And so they decide to go on the Sea of Galilee, and the Sea of Galilee is a rough sea. It can be tough. People die on that sea. And so they decided to go out. It was in the early afternoon, and they were going to cross the sea, and Jesus wanted to be alone, which he often did. And he wanted to be alone, and he said he would join them later on the other side. They didn't ask how or why, but that's just how it worked with him. And so Peter is in the boat, and the others are in the boat, and a huge storm comes up. Now, it was okay with Peter because Peter, he was a fisherman. He was on the Sea of Galilee all the time. So he's used to storms, but this was an especially big storm. It'd be like being in a tornado while on the ocean. So Matthew says, as he describes this, you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and so the Gospels describe this same story. And Matthew says it was so bad the waves tormented us, and they were having a hard time keeping the ship upright. And it had gone on for hours, so now it's about 3 a.m., so they're exhausted. And then they noticed a shadow moving on the water. And, it's a little spooky. I mean, you're out there, it's 3 a.m., and all this is happening, and then you see this shadow, which looks like a human being, moving on the water. And one of them said, it's a ghost. And that's a sign. It means we're all about to die. And so the ghosts are coming to carry us away. And so they said, who is it? What's happening? What's going on? And Jesus said, it's just me. He's a cool guy. Just me. I'm just out for a little stroll, and this storm is not slowing me down much. I don't really need a boat. And it's interesting because Matthew adds the idea. It says that Jesus did not intend to see them. He was only intending to pass them by because he was going to the other side to meet them. But he saw they were in trouble and they were scared, and so he headed in their direction. So that's the story. Now, Peter, maybe like you would be, Peter was excited at that point, and he said, I don't really know if it's you. If it's you, command me to come out. In other words, he said, if it's really you, invite me to go walking with you. And so Jesus said, okay, boy, come on. Storms do that to us sometimes. Come on. And Peter put one foot out. He put the second foot out. And there he goes, walking on the water, walking toward Jesus. And then it says, he saw the wind. And it's hard to see the wind. But it says he saw the wind and he began to sink. And then Jesus reached out, picked him up, and brought him back to the boat and said, what's up with your faith? What's going on? Where's your focus? Because it's all about what you're focusing on, right? If you're focusing on Jesus or the Christ consciousness, you can walk on the water. There's a body of water right down here. Some of you can go out later and see. Because, on a sunny day, it's pretty easy to do. Stormy day, not so easy. And so that was the situation. And of course, for us, what that means is sometimes life gets rough. Sometimes life can be surprisingly rough, and sometimes we find ourselves in situations much like that, like we don't really know what to do or how to handle this situation. But one thing for sure, if you're going to walk on the water, you've got to get out of the damn boat. It says that in the original. You've got to get out of the boat. You've got to get out of the boat or you'll stay stuck there. And there's something inside of most of us that wants to get out of the boat. There's something inside of us, most of us, that wants to reach for something higher. Maybe we're scared to do it, but we still want to do that. So that leads me to the all-important question of what is your boat? What is your boat? Because the boat represents security. The boat represents safety. The boat represents whatever you trust in or whoever you trust in. Especially when it gets stormy, what do you lean on? If you've got a leaning post, what is the leaning post you always go to? If you're not sure what your boat is, then I could ask you the question, what are you afraid of? And that tells you what your boat is, because it's going to be the opposite. What is it that makes you afraid? What threatens you the most? Because that's what your boat is. It could be losing a job. It could be losing love. It could be losing your health. It could be just change. A change is coming, and we may not want the change to happen. It could be one boat that you depend on all the time. Or it could be multiple boats. You may have more than one. Jesus and the universe are sort of the same in this way. Both of them would say to you, get out of the boat. Get out of the boat. And you hear that in so many different ways. Get out of the boat. Give it a try. Jump, leap, try it. And so that's what Peter did. He stepped out of the boat. And so I don't know what your boat happens to be. There was a study done several years ago by Larry Lawton, and he's a philosopher of science, and what he studied is risk management. And he says we live in a society that is so fear-driven, that we suffer from what he calls risk lock, like gridlock, except risk lock. And he gives this definition. It is a condition which, like gridlock, leaves us unable to do hardly anything. And sometimes it causes us to be stuck, and we just freeze like a deer in the headlights. And he summarizes his literature with 19 principles. That's right. I'm going to give all 19, baby. So just prepare yourself. No, I'm only going to give one. I'm only going to give the first one. And the first one is very simple, and it only involves 3 words. And the 3 words are, everything is risky. Everything's risky. It's always risky to do something, to make a change. If you're looking for absolute safety, then you probably chose the wrong species, because human beings are always trying to risk something. You may, and I understand this, you may want to just stay in bed and cover up your head and stay there. You feel safe in that boat, I suppose. But you have to remember, and he gave this information, you have to remember that 500,000 Americans require emergency treatment every year because they fall out of the bed. So even the bed is not a safe place. Elvis Presley used to have his windows covered with aluminum foil. You could do that, but did you know 10 people a year, while they're messing around with their window, hang themselves on the cord connected to the blinds? So even trying to cover your window could be dangerous. Kevin, when I think about Kevin, I think about money, of course. So when I think about Kevin, you could hide your money in a mattress. Could be a good idea. But tens of thousands of people, he said, go to the emergency room every year because of wounds caused by handling their money. And you think, what? And I did too. I thought, well, how could that be? And the reason, number one, paper cuts. They get infected, money's dirty, get infected, and they go to the emergency room. And the other one was hernias. And that's for the people who have a lot of money, I suppose. In the mattress. Some guy named Trump, he's in there all the time. But if you step up to the plate, you may strike out. If you step out of the boat, you're not sure what's going to happen. Somebody said, well, it's better to love and lose than not love at all. Do you agree?
Yes.
So if you live in a boat, I can guarantee you can live in the boat, but sooner or later you're going to die. And you're going to die of boredom or stagnation. And so the entire universe is calling you and calling me to step out of the boat. Everything is risky. Storms come and go. Storms come and go. And then let me tell you the part of the story I don't like. The part of the story I don't like is I'd like to just say, so just do this and fear will disappear. You'll never be afraid again. But that's not what the story says. The story says fear comes anytime you step out of the boat. The story says anytime you step out of your comfort zone, there's going to be fear. And so if you just sit there and gaze at the fear, you're going to be stuck there and frozen there forever. So the thing to do is say, look, fear is just the way it is. I mean, fear and launching out is like macaroni, cheese. It's a package. They go together. They go together, and that's how life is. So fear isn't something you get rid of. Fear is sort of like something that's standing beside you, and you say, okay, you're with me, but I'm going to step out of the boat anyway. Does that make sense? And so we jump, we go, we move anyway, and we stop trying to make it stop. And I know there's a part of us that wants to just stay on the couch. Somebody said that the most famous chair, I guess the best-selling chair in America is the Lazy Boy. So it's not Risk-a-Boy. It's not Work-a-Boy. It's Lazy Boy. And that's because we like comfort. And so that means we want to kind of lounge and veg out. But the whole truth is we want to lunch out. We want to do something because we are here for a reason. I know the wind blows and I know the lightning can be bright and the thunder can be loud, but we want to step out and do something. And you have that seed inside of you. You have that something that cooks inside of you, that heats you up. And that's when you want to do something. You want to step out. You want to step out. Lots of studies have been done over the last 10 years at least on resiliency. And lots of books have been written about it, and sorry to say that usually if I see one of those books, I'll buy one. So I have several of them. And there's lots of beautiful research done in the study of resiliency. Because the research tells us that some people survive a storm. Some people thrive in a storm, and others don't. And so what is it that makes the difference? See, that's what we need to know. What makes the difference? And they've studied like the 3,000 POWs who were in Korea, and they were put through a brainwashing kind of program. Many of them lost their identity, but some of them didn't. 550 men who lived through captivity in Vietnam, some of them lost their sanity, but some of them didn't. 52 hostages released after 14 months in Iran. Some of those people lost their concept of who they were. But some of them didn't. In the Nazi concentration camps, some people died. The people that often died were the people that were stealing the bread out of the mouth of someone else. The people that survived were the people that were taking care of other people. God, that makes a difference, doesn't it? It makes a big difference. The difference is focus. And so here's what they found. People generally respond to traumatic problems in one of two ways. Number one, they're defeated by the situation. And those are the people that stay in the boat. Those are the people that just give up and say, I can never get through this. And they give up hope. It's never going to be different. But some of them are marked by resiliency. They not only survive, but they grow and they thrive in that situation. Let me mention a few things that makes a difference briefly, and then I'm going to look in detail in a few, and then I'm done. And the first thing I'll mention is this. What makes a difference? It helps when you think you have some control over your destiny. If you feel like you have no control at all, it's going to be over soon. And so you want to have some control of your destiny, and it's all inside your head. It's all inside of your head. Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, was in a Nazi concentration camp, and of course in that book he described how that he thought the Nazis have control over his body. They have control when he eats or what he eats or if he eats at all. They have control of all the physical things that he has to do day and night. But he said, the one thing you don't control is how I look at this situation. And that gave him the feeling that he was in control of something. That's important if you're going through a storm. Number two, courage. Courage helps. You can focus and live in fear, or you can shift it and be courageous. And it's just a thought away, either way. Then thirdly, find meaning and purpose in the suffering. Where do you get meaning and purpose? The shaman said a long time ago, you make it up. You make it up because we're making it all up anyway. So you create meaning and create purpose. And a strong sense of identity. You've got to know who you are. And so let me give a little detail on some of those. And the first one is authentic identity. If you're going to go through a storm, you want to know who you are. You've got to know who you are, and it's got to be authentic identity. It's who you really are at a spiritual level. It's your divinity. I know we get mixed up with that because, I might think, well, I'm just the guy who came because James and Evelyn got together a long time ago, and then here I am. But that's too surface, and that's not really who you and I are. We're much more than that. We are divinity itself. We are eternal. And so when you're going through a storm, if you can remember who you really are, you are empowered to move through it and even learn from it. So it must be at a soul level. When you operate at a soul level, you rise above heredity. You rise above the lesser identities you have because you understand that you are spirit in the flesh. And you just operate with that identity. And it means you have to remind yourself of it again and again and again. And so you take those eternal qualities. I know we get distracted because there's a lot of noise around us that pulls us back and forth in different directions. I know the thunder can be loud, and I know that the waves can be high, and I know it can be scary, and I know it hurts sometimes. You may be in a storm right now. Or maybe you're just coming out of one. Or maybe you're about to go into one this coming week. We never know. We never know. But you can have power going through it. You can throw away your victim card. You don't have to be whining as you go through the storm. You can be invincible because you are eternal. That's really who you are. But if you don't remember that, it doesn't do you any good at all. The sun is shining outside. Sun is always shining. But whether we get to embrace the sun depends on if we go out and we stand there and we take it all in. And the same thing, good things are happening all the time, but if we're not opening up to it, our experience may not be the same thing at all because we miss out on the whole deal. It's as if we can fly through this whole deal. We can fly like an eagle. We can fly through the storm. We can fly through these things if we understand exactly who we are. It's almost like, in fact, it is like divine perfection. And if we hold to that, we can rise above anything. The movie we had here a few weeks ago, Beggar Vance, it talked about finding your authentic swing. And your authentic swing, in case you don't know, is your divinity. That's your authentic swing. So principle one, as you go through a storm, you want to remind yourself every day, every hour, every minute, who you really are. You're more than just a person. And then secondly, when you're facing the storm, you want to realize that your potential and your purpose are larger than your problem. And if your problem seems as if it's bigger than everything else, it means your telescope, you're using the wrong end. And you want to flip it around. Because the largest thing about you is your potential, your infinite potential, and your purpose. And your purpose, you didn't come into this body, you did not come into this body to get stuff. You didn't come to be a collector. I'm reminded of our old president, and what was his name? I believe we called him W. And W, I think the towers were hit, and we didn't know what to do. And he said, and I'm not making fun of him in any way, but he said, what you need to do is go shopping. And I'm suggesting that's not the answer. The answer isn't collecting and getting. The solution is to give and to find a need and fulfill it. This morning, I'm shaving. You probably didn't know I shave, but I'm shaving, and then I cut myself and I start bleeding. It just keeps bleeding, and it keeps doing that. And I'm driving here, and this side of the mustache is just red. I mean, it's bleeding, and I'm putting papers on it and stuff. It's still bleeding. And I get out, and the only person here is Carol Cross. And she's, I think, with the kids right now. And so she's there. Naturally, I walked up to her, and I said, I'm bleeding. What should I do? And she said, pepper. Put pepper on it. I said, okay. And she said, yeah, it will stop immediately. So I go, and I get the pepper, and I put it on. Bam. Stopped. My point is, she was like this fountain, and I was thirsty. I needed information. And it was interesting because I just walked up to her and she just gave it. And that's why you're here. That's why you're here. Maybe someone just needs you to listen to them. Maybe someone needs you to touch them. Maybe someone just needs a hug. Maybe someone just needs a kind word. But that's what you're here for. If you're walking around thinking, I need somebody to be nice to me, I need somebody to be nice to me, you may be sad that day. But if you're thinking, you know, God is flowing through me and I've got something to give. You're like the spiritual UPS person and you got a package to deliver, so you want to deliver that package. That's what you're here to do. And so your potential and your purpose are bigger than anything else. That's principle 2. Principle 3. Principle 3 is that the presence of God expresses fully through you, even though you're not in this incarnational experience perfect yet. How many of you are perfect in the incarnational experience? Now, divinely we are, but in the experience of life, we're not. And you know what some people do? Some people just wait. You see people sitting on the corner and you say, what are you waiting for? And, well, I'm waiting till I get all my ducks in a row. If I get my ducks in a row, then I'll begin to do something. I've got to plan everything out. I've got to make sure everything's going to be perfect. And all those opportunities are going by. If we're going to wait till we get perfect, guess what we're going to do? Nothing. Nothing. Because that never happens. So what we want to do is wherever we happen to be in life, we want to go with it at that point. Because most of us never really quite feel ready when an opportunity comes. And so even in the midst of chaos, the time is absolutely now. The cool thing is I can claim and see health in my body even though my body temple may not be giving me evidence for that right now. I can feel and experience joy right now even if I don't have that on the outside, because it's a choice. It's a choice that we make. And so when somebody says, one day I'm going to be happy, someday you won't believe what I'm going to do. I'm going to do something magnificent. When are you going to do that? Someday. And as you know, someday is not on the calendar anywhere. And so it has to be today. It can be today. It is right now. Right now is the time. Right now is the time to do something. And so I'm sure you're going to do something today, and let that flow through you. And my final point is this. Final point is Cindy's song. A change is going to come. A change is going to come. A storm is going to come. And a storm is going to go. And so you want to be ready. You don't want to be thrown. You're not scared because it's coming, because you know exactly who you are. See, that's reminding us. Sometimes the storm comes. There it goes. It comes and it goes. And so you want to be ready because a time is coming. A change is coming. A change is coming. And changes can be wonderful. Changes can be beautiful. I want to tell you something. This is sort of a secret. Some of you may know if you've been around for a long time, but some of you may not. In this kind of teaching, and if you're here for the first time, you're going to really get the information right up front. So that's good. So at this kind of teaching, we talk about things like love, peace, joy, plenitude, all those beautiful, beautiful topics. But sometimes we don't talk about the fine print. And there's fine print to this kind of teaching. And the fine print is sometimes there's pain. Oh, no, I'm in the wrong place. Sometimes there's hurt. Sometimes you have to give up something. Sometimes you have to release something. Jesus had a crowd following him, like 5,000 people. Now, if you got 5,000 people following you, you want to give a good talk. And you want to talk about love and peace and joy and cool stuff. Instead, he said, see this seed? If I plant the seed, a plant comes up. Growth happens. But before the plant comes up, guess what happens to the seed? It dies. And he said to the crowd, and that's what you'll have to do. Sometimes you have to die to things. Sometimes you have to let things go. And the key to that is sometimes we think in this teaching that if we're not feeling good, if we're not happy, if we're not laughing, we're doing something wrong. But the truth is, sometimes there's storms and sometimes there's not. There's high points and low points, but we're remaining the same as we move through it because all of those things can help us grow. Does that make sense to you? And so it doesn't mean we're escaping life at all. It's like an acorn. You know, the acorn, an oak tree is going to come out. But it has to let go. The seed has to open up. And so you and I have to open up. We may have a coping mechanism that we've used since we were 5 years old. And it works well. And it works well getting attention from people. But as we grow spiritually, we may decide, you know, I can't use that coping mechanism anymore. You may have friends that are pulling you down. You may have to let those friends go because they're not allowing you to grow. And so sometimes we simply have to give up things. You can go outside, maybe even today because it is pretty warm, and you can see a caterpillar walking down the road. And it's a perfectly fine caterpillar. Nothing wrong with it. It's perfect, just the way it is. It is absolutely complete, Mr. Caterpillar. But inside of that caterpillar, there's a butterfly waiting to come out that's going to be equally perfect, but just in a different location. And so the same thing is true of you. Same thing is true of you, that you're perfect right now, just the way you are, divinely speaking. But that doesn't mean you're going to stay static. A change is going to come, and you're going to continue to grow. And then you're going to be flying around like a butterfly. That's how it works. And so we're always changing, always growing. And so just because you may be praying, you may be meditating, you're doing all this stuff, and you're taking classes. One person said, I've been taking classes. I've taken 2 or 3 classes, and I feel so nasty inside. Sometimes people feel that way. Sometimes people feel like, well, I thought this teaching would take away all the problems, but the problem's not gone away. But what happens is you begin to expand, and the problem just dissolves. It changes. What really changes, of course, is you and me as we move through it. So, I've talked about coping mechanisms. I've talked about feeling good. I've talked about a change is coming. You know, if you've got a washing machine at your house and you look at it, ours has lots of buttons. I'm very confused by it. But if you might find something like agitate. And you throw your clothes in there. And if the clothes could talk to you, they would be saying, "Oh, no, I can't stand it. You're agitating me." And then it slips into spin. And then they say, "Ooh, yeah, everything's cool now." That's the same for us. Sometimes we're in agitation, and sometimes we're on the spin cycle. And God lives where? Both. God's in there with the agitation, and you're getting all the dirt out. And then in the spin cycle, you're enjoying that, and God's involved in that as well. In the Psalms, it says, "In the darkness, the light of God shines just like the day." Just like the day. Just like the day. It's all the same. Let me close with a quote. This man said, "Hey, do you see the rose? And on the wall, there's a brown frame. And inside the brown frame, there's a rosebud. Hasn't bloomed, it's really tight. And underneath that picture, it said this: and the time came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to bloom." So you were born to bloom. You were born to fly. And one of the things that can help you the most sometimes is a good storm. It's true. Let's turn within. Let that float around inside of us for a moment. As we turn within, I set myself free this morning. I embrace the good. I embrace the beautiful. I embrace love. I embrace poise and joy. And I'm out of the boat, knowing that God is omnipresent. God is everywhere. Wind can be blowing, storm can be coming, storm can be going. But we feel ourselves consciously unified with the presence. And it's not once I get my ducks in a row. It's not once I get my life together, everything's going to be good then. No, it's right now. Sun is shining right now. Life is good right now. No distance, no separation, and I recognize it. That's an important word, recognize it, because it means recognize it. It means we change our thinking. We change our thinking so that we can see it. And what do we see? We see what we want to see. We see what we choose to see. We recognize it. Now, I have the privilege to speak at this moment for every one of us. But I must first ask a question of you, and I'm going to ask that you respond out loud when I ask you the question. And the question is, will you be made whole? Let me hear you.
Yes.
One more time. And then one more time. Will you be made whole?
Yes.
Tell me with some conviction, will you be made whole?
Yes.
And so it's into that yes that I speak. And I speak for individuals right here who say yes to their divinity, who say yes to their beauty, who say yes to their plenitude and abundance and flow, who say yes to the transforming knowledge that lifts them above any storm or helps them simply to move through it. Yes. Say that with me. Yes. That's such a good word. We don't want to say no. We want to say yes, 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 yes. We say yes, whole and complete in every area of our life. And we stand up and say yes. That's what we do. And so now we can smile at the storm, we can laugh at the wind, we can fly through the lightning, and we can do just what Jesus did. Jesus stood up and he said to the storm, and we can speak to the problem, you see. We can speak to the problem. We can speak to the tree that's not producing fruit. We can speak to the car that's not running. We can speak to the body that's not doing exactly what we want it to do. We can speak to the relationship that's not exactly where we want it to be. We can look at that relationship and we can say, peace. Jesus looked at the wild water and said, peace, be still. And so we can do the same thing. Peace, be still. Reminds me, I think it's of the old Eddie Murphy thing is what, I mean, he just popped into my head, but everything is good in God's neighborhood. Everything is good in God's neighborhood. And God's neighborhood is everywhere. Everywhere. And so we rejoice, we are grateful, we release, and we know that all is well. Doesn't matter how it looks, all is well. And before I close this prayer, I want to speak directly to you, directly just to you. So I'm speaking to you. You are significant. You. You ask yourself, is he talking to me? Yeah, I'm talking to you. You are significant. You are important. You are on purpose with a purpose today, right now. And you are made in the image and the likeness of God. You have infinite potential regardless of how things look outside of you. And so take a deep, holy breath and proclaim with me as we close the prayer. And so it is. Thank you very much.